Okay. Sanbonani. Oh gosh, that is bothering me so much. Let me try to center myself in the frame. Okay. In part of the frame. Sanbonani. Ninjani. Ningezwa kahle? I hope you can hear me well. What's mginxi of in everything that we are looking at ahead of us? It's been a year since I last saw this space. I hope that you've been well. I hope that it's been good. Okay. All right. Lesedi Khanya, Makhosi, Thokozani, Sanbonani. Welcome to this reading for the year 2025. Happy Lunar New Year from me, and Happy Chinese New Year. This is the first new moon of 2025, so that makes it the Lunar New Year. It's crazy that it is a new moon in Aquarius and we're experiencing it just days after Aquarius was Kazimi, Pluto was Kazimi in Aquarius. And it has been a year since I've in the space and that I've been doing readings, astral readings, and so on. And prior to that, if you remember 2023, I spoke a lot about, 2023 is giving you a look into what Pluto in Aquarius will look like. And then last year, January, we had Pluto fully move into Aquarius. And that was the first year that we were seeing Pluto in Aquarius, talks of revolution and what that looks like. And the thing is that when we look back at the slowest moving planets, right? We're talking hundreds of years, and we look back at the Renaissance and like, oh, Shaka Zulu and all of that. There's so much ideology. Yeah, ideology that's coloring our perspective because we're looking at something that happened way before we were, right? And we only see the benefits of what that resulted in. For instance, we can look at the greatness of the Zulu nation today. I mean, we saw when Pluto was also moving into Aquarius, we also saw the time of Umisuzulu coming into his coronation and how that pulled together the Zulu nation across the African continent. Now we can look at it that and reflect on what Shaka laid down um, during his tenure and see how it plays out today. But before that, remember that the Zulu nation was formed through conquer, empire building. It was war. It wasn't like people were just chilling and saying, oh, yeah, sure, I want to be a subject of Shaka Zulu. No, people had their own kingdoms. And Shaka Zulu said, it's my kingdom now. That's how, Pluto shaped history. So when we're thinking about these movements in these very ideological um, ways, we forget the way they would disrupt the lived experience of a person experiencing them in real time. And this year, we kicked off um, a Pluto Kazimi in Aquarius on January 21st, which was literally the day before the inauguration. So, just kind of giving you a high level view of like, hey, this is what's in store. It's not going to be cute. We've spoken about revolution, but what does revolution look like? What does revolution feel like, especially right now, this moment, this lunation in particular, this lunar new moon in Aquarius, the sleepless nights. Why is it even happening? Like, there's so much going on in the last 10 days. Um, Today is literally the day that Uranus has finally stationed direct, still in Taurus. In the last 10 days, we have seen the ceasefire in Gaza, people being able to move back into the north, people reclaiming their homes. So, again, that disruption that the retrograde brought kind of starting to simmer down. We're seeing that shift. But what does that represent in the long run? That's really why we find ourselves in this place where the veil is so thin and our attention is being called for us to become aware that this is really here. It's really happening. It's not something we're talking about anymore. It's here and it's now. And there are a lot of illusions that are shattered. And as that happens, our attention is being called inwards. Right now, how I'm seeing the year is there's nothing happening in the first quarter, or it feels like internally, personally, there is nothing happening. There's no motion, there's no movement, no conclusion. And then the second quarter, we start to feel like everything happening all at once. The third quarter is where we start to experience reprieve and we reconcile in the final quarter of this year. And the lovely thing about how this year ends out is that it gives us an opportunity to really reflect um, on where we stand. But in order to be able to get to the place where we know where we stand, we have to go through these growing pains, these transitions, these experiences, um, this calling to look inward. Aquarius rules new ideas, new concepts, new ways of being. And that's really what this age of Aquarius with Pluto in Aquarius has been the harbinger of, right? And been spoken of for so many decades and anticipated. That's been the basis of their anticipation. But this year, that's not the only thing that is revolutionary in the sky. I've called them the slow horses of the revolution. Um, that is Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, Jupiter. Those are our slower moving planets. Some move more slower than others, but we it's crazy how much revolution has happened under the signs that these planets are moving into in this year. The beautiful thing about it, though, or the gentle okusixolelayo, at least something to hold on to, is that these big planets won't be aspecting each other during this year. So as each planet moves into its most revolutionary station, where we'll have Uranus going into Gemini, where we'll have Neptune going into Aries, um, Saturn going into Aries, Jupiter moving into Cancer, which is actually the nicest one. Not so much negativity or disruption with that, but when we have those movements happening in the course of this year, it is as though each planet is going to be in its own bubble of movement. It's not necessarily that like Uranus is immediately going to aspect Pluto or Aries when it jumps into Gemini. Do you know? It's going to give us an opportunity to get an idea of what it's bringing to the surface for humanity to confront within itself before those kind of transits happen over the course of the next 7 years, and God help us when they do. But for instance, if you look at when I say these are really massive shifts that we can anticipate, Uranus was last in Gemini between 1941 and 1949. That was the Second World War. That was Africa finding itself involved in things it did not start. Um, that was the, actual implementation of apartheid. That was the Nakba. That was the atomic bomb. These are the nature of influences that these transits, that these big transits have brought with them. Neptune moves into Aries this year as well. Again, another planet that has brought with it revolution, most notably the Russian Revolution. Yes, the American Civil War. Yes, more specifically, also the end of colonial French, European colonial power. Um, like its first iteration of that, where now Europe had to rethink how it operates in the world. And the thing about Neptune moves a little bit slowly, but what has been interesting to me looking over these planets has been how the events that have happened under these transits in the past have typically been the West finding itself at a dead end, working itself into a place of, you know, nationalist pride, shutting down um, relations within its own communities and breaking itself down economically to the extent where it has consistently then stopped and looked at, okay, how best can we exploit Africa? That's what kind of happens after the cycle. If you look at the 10-year cycle um, that plays out after we see transits like the ones that we're looking at. So Africa in those same transits has always been more inclined to movement building, um, consolidation of ideals. Um, it's when Mkhonto Sizwe was formed, when we look at Uranus in Gemini, 1944, Mkhonto Sizwe, Nelson Mandela joins Mkhonto Sizwe. We see also in the 1940s, Chief Albert Luthuli joining the ANC. So there is so much revolution packed into these transits that are happening all at the same time. But again, this year is a preview before they settle into their new designations fully in 2026. And then we'll actually begin to aspect each other in the years to come. And when we see this, we might think or we might imagine that revolution happens out there somewhere, that it is the work of others or it happens to us and we merely respond to it. What I can say is that history is made by people, individuals, individuals who make decisions. You have every opportunity to make a decision that can change the course of history. There is no reason to imagine yourself exempt from the revolution, to imagine yourself somehow escaping the changes that are on their way to us. One thing I can say for sure is that if you're a millennial like me, um, and there was a world you grew up seeing, we grew up seeing the world that was built by the baby boomers. Um, and we imagined that would be the world that we inherit, the world that you see in rom-coms, in Sex and the City, in Living Color. We imagined that we would grow up and that would be our reality. Now, there is no doubt that anything that we have known before now is gone. Even the promises being made by these fascist governments, oh, your make American great again and yada yada, the ideology that they're selling cannot exist in the world that we are becoming. There is just too much forward movement. It will look like something we have never imagined before. It's just that simple. So, I spoke about the first quarter being one in which it feels as though nothing is really happening, especially in a personal sense. We can feel a really slow start to the new year. We started the new year in a Mars retrograde. Mars is the planet that kind of gives us our sense of motivation, our sense of drive. And we started in a Mars retrograde. And that retrograde went into Cancer. So Mars is fire, and then it went into water. So it just kind of slowed things down a lot. But the thing I've been observing about this Mars retrograde in Cancer. So when we look at Mars war and we look at retrograde, retrogrades are kind of like when we're learning. And I think you can consider the learning or the reflections of war being retribution. And Mars, Mars's retribution in Cancer has been this theme of really Cancer ruling family life, right? Cancer being a very maternal sign ruled by the moon, emotional, nurturing. And this theme of pedophiles just getting their comeuppance is chef's kiss. I'm sorry. Couldn't have written it better myself. They are taking themselves out. I loathe to celebrate, you know, people taking themselves out, but it's like we're talking about pedophiles here. We can't pretend. Is that's happening, which is basically having to come to terms with the truth of what you are, right? And can you actually stomach it if it is being revealed to the world? Um, the truth of how you participate with the most vulnerable in your community. And again, we have movements in Venus that will be happening, especially over the next few days. And I mean, Venus doing all this right around Valentine's Day or right before Valentine's Day. It's kind of like a real one for the lovers, as if we haven't already had a year for the lovers. But this Valentine's is going to be for the lovers. We're seeing um, Venus joining Neptune and Pisces on February the 1st, and in the North Node, with Pisces in the North Node. So it's just like dream lover, because Pisces, that's your dreamer. The North Node, that's your direction. Venus, that's your romance, that's your heart, that's what you hold dear as what is beautiful. Um, and that's giving us an opportunity to really suspend our disbelief and just jump into the romanticism. of love. But there is a possibility of, um, you know, telling ourselves lies, perhaps, about certain dynamics. So I would say this is not a time to be manifesting lovers, but enjoy what is there. What it is a time for, ideologically, is ukuzinza. We've spoken about ukuzinza in the past. Ukuzinza is the practice of isolation. um, that is what it looks like in practice when we say, like, for instance, when the initiates go to the mountain, sithi bazinzile, they've gone to be with themselves. And that is what this time until about the end of February, when Mars makes a move, out of out of the retrograde, that we're going to have an opportunity to introspect, ask ourselves what it is that we stand for. There's an ideological war that is happening. There is a lot of talk because we've still got Jupiter in Gemini, a lot of talk, um, and a lot of posturing. And it's very easy to get swept up in notions that perhaps don't even represent your true politic if you haven't given yourself an opportunity to sit with yourself. And that is what, for me, this first quarter really is all about, like going all the way up till March. What you want to be doing is sitting with yourself and interrogating what you stand for, why you say you stand for what you stand for. And this is like on very personal matters, um, especially when we're looking at Venus. So, the right to love, like, what is your ideal with respect to love? What are your ideals with respect to family? What are your ideals when you imagine yourself as a person participating in community? The illusion of the individual being able to exist outside of community is going to disintegrate very quickly. We have already began to see it happening with the, Kazemi, of Pluto and Aquarius, and how it instantaneously, showed collective consequence to individual choices. So you make a choice because I feel this way and that way. But when the ramifications of that choice come, it is a collective that experiences the consequence. And you cannot eh, you escape those consequences as an individual. It's not possible because the level at which it happens, especially with the slower moving planets, is on a collective basis. It is at such a high level that it will affect you. You cannot escape it. Personal choice cannot escape it. It will require for us to be part of community. That was a big theme that we discussed in 2023 and 2024, that we must learn the significance of being in community with others. And we are very quickly seeing the ramifications of people imagining that they can live outside of community. This year might be challenging, sure. We may be crying, yeah, but it's really not even the worst of it. So if we're not interrogating our own understanding of community, what it is we're willing to do to show up as a part of the collective in order for us to be able to have our own human experience within the reality that we co create with those around us, really will be tested in the decade that is coming. And the best time to figure out where you stand is now, because you're going to have a bit of a test run in this year. That first quarter, the romance of being able to sit with yourself ends quite abruptly with the Venus retrograde in Aries on the 1st of March, which also just kind of precedes the first eclipse season. So, as I had said, it feels as though it's slow, but when we hit March, when we hit that second quarter, when we enter the astrological new year, it's going to feel like everything is happening all at once. Also, because we're going to have a number of planets that are going to be in Aries at that time. The lunar eclipse is going to be happening in Aries at that time. Mercury is going to be, oh, not the lunar eclipse, pardon me, the solar eclipse happening in Aries at the end of March. And we're also going to see Mercury retrograding out of Pisces and back into Aries. And we're going to see at the end of March, Neptune, that massive revolutionary planet, enter Aries as well for the first time since 1875. Now, 1875, that was Russian Revolution. Guys, if we don't become socialist as a planet during the next 10 years, please just put me out of my misery, because everything is there. Everything is there. And the thing about Neptune, when Neptune goes retrograde, it will not be leaving Aries. Neptune is sitting in Aries um, from now, from March the 30th. You know, it's quite interesting what we're seeing, though, um, with those dates, because there's that Venus retrograde, which is going to be going back, Venus retrograding from Aries back into Pisces. That's between March 1st and April 12th. And the last time we saw this Venus retrograde was around the same time of year, March, April 2017. Yo! And Venus, personal planet, right? So you can think about what was happening for you around that time. But when we're thinking about collectively, something that for me was a bit of a highlight when I was looking into this was that that was also the time of Brexit. So again, people voting for things, choosing things based on like uh, individual and selfish reasons. Like a lot of people who we've had like a good amount of time, what, 8 years now since the Brexit vote. And the way that the UK has just, the quality of life has fallen to dust in that 8 year window. And a lot of people who look back at the choices that they made when they were voting in Brexit talk about that they were just, individually jealous when they were looking at foreigners succeeding in their country, and they weren't thinking of the consequences of their choices um, collectively on the cost of living and things like that. So when we look at these transits, again, consider your action, your participation in community, and the consequences of that. Do not make a choice to stand ideologically on the side of oppression because you think that you will somehow benefit. Because when the consequences of your very short sighted choices come home to roost, you will be standing on your own, unable to pay for the electricity in your house. like the Brexit voters in England, right? So also Venus retrograde, Venus being a planet ruling the feminine, women's rights, Venus and Aries, um, but now we're going retrograde. If we look at the last time we saw the Venus retrograde in Aries, again back to March, April of 2017, we were being confronted quite aggressively with conservative Christian ideologies impacting our politics. And the violence that is, um, in the long run, sets the decades. Um, it's it's quite scary because it also happened on the back of um, the first time that Trump did what he's done this week with respect to the global gag, or well, in the time since he's been president anyway, the global gag rule with sex education, and you cannot, if you're a recipient of American aid or funding, the global gag rule means that you cannot incorporate sex education into the healthcare that you provide. It shuts down reproductive health. So you're looking. It, and then it also coincides with this resurgence of missionaries in Africa. So boots on the ground, spreading an ideology that, spreading an oppressive ideology. And speaking of oppressive ideologies, speaking of, quite honestly, what the ideological choice costume that fascism has chosen to dress itself in, um, this time around, has been conservative Christianity. Just today, we saw a priest uh, do a Nazi salute. Um, the day after the inauguration, we had a priest speaking directly to the president and saying, do not act in hate. And in response to that, all these right-wing evangelical priests, who are a cornerstone of Trump's campaign, came out of the woodwork like cockroaches in a brothel, talking about how imperative it is to hate the members of the LGBTQ movement if you consider yourself a good Christian. Those words are not in the Bible. Interrogate where you stand. We have had a year of Jupiter in Gemini where too much of this, not enough consideration, too much talk, not enough consideration about the ramifications of what our talk leads to. Too many podcast mics, not enough introspection. That has really had quite an ideological impact, but it's not new. It's something that was seeded um, on the back of these propaganda campaigns dressed as unrelated, interjections. Oh, it's quite interesting. Jupiter and Gemini, I'd be interested in looking at the time the Bell Pottinger sort of fallout and Jupiter and Gemini and how that impact played out, because I see so much of that being the first iteration. So you're looking at 2010 to 2011-ish kind of impact, um, and how the media is used to manipulate how we think and act collectively. And of course, we cannot ignore how much that impact is there, that impact is visible, especially now that we as individuals have become the creators of media, especially with Jupiter in Gemini. And the movement of that we were going to see Uranus going into Gemini in the second half of the year, that is going to be quite an interesting thing to consider, um, how that will intersect with, because Uranus is moving into Gemini, which again is talking. Um, Revolution is Uranus and Gemini, talking, communication, air travel, space travel, all of that. But what media is going to look like, and how much disruption is going to come up from what is said, and how news is seeded into our communities. So, knowing that that kind of disruption is on its way to us, that is why I come back and say that spend the first quarter in flow with the movements of the celestial bodies. Allow yourself to introspect. Zivumele uzinze. Sit with your feelings. Sit with your interrogate your ideology. Interrogate what has been shaping what for you. Um, I quite like that we're now seeing Neptune in Pisces, also having to question itself as it leaves Pisces, as it moves out. This question, is it Neptune in Pisces? Yeah. This question of what lies have we been telling ourselves about the work that we've been doing, about um, our spiritual lives. Um, because Neptune in Aries is going to require that we be about it, not just pretend about it. Um, the last year, Jupiter in Gemini, with Neptune being in Pisces, has been an easy time to perform, um, to put on that performance of what it is that you represent. But where we're going, that will be tested. So when we look at that second quarter, we're seeing all these planets move into Aries, Neptune, controlling our dream space, our ideology, uh, how we look at the world ahead, and also revolution. Okay. It's definitely going to shift how we look at and understand ourselves individually as part and parcel of labor, um, as part and parcel of nation states. Um, leaving the American Revolution was America leaving, uh, annexing itself from Britain. The Russian Revolution was the end of the rule of the czars, and you know, were feudalism coming to an end. We're currently in a place where our feudal lords are the billionaires. Um, we are not connected as a as the working class. Um, we've been subject to distraction under Jupiter and Gemini. It's peaked. But when Jupiter moves out of Gemini in Cancer, we're going to be looking for more substance in what engages us. That happening at the same time as Neptune is in Aries, we're once again considering where we see ourselves as part of the greater whole. I think Saturn is also entering in the second quarter. Saturn is also entering Aries on May the 24th. So like I love, you know, that I love the mid-year solstice, and this year's mid-year solstice is going to be really, as always, that place where we're given something, a space to breathe, reconsideration, and that loving moment. And there's just a support for us to put into practice the things that we spent the first quarter thinking about ideologically, how those confrontations will be happening and playing out, where our ideology is being tested in the second quarter. When we find ourselves in the third quarter, which is the first part of the second half of the year, we've now got a little bit of space to on the training wheels of like how we want to show up in our communities. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. And I'm going to come back again to Uranus in Gemini for that second half of the year, because it's happening on the 7th of July. And I just want to say that, like, 1941 to 1949, so people, the older boomers are the ones who would have that as a natal placement, right? So if for me, I'm lucky enough that both of my parents were born within that window, so they have a natal placement of Uranus in Gemini. So using looking at how they impact community, how that impacts their communication style, how that these are the people who built so much of the culture that us millennials grew up in and participated in and anticipated as our future, the stuff that we valued, um, in terms of community. The foundation of that was built by people of that generation, right? Um, I think your Stephen Bantu Bikos were born in around that. Let me just check I want to be sure I had intended. There's just so much happening with yeah, Stephen Biko was born in this with that same natal placement. So again, ideological movements and how the people born with that natal placement framed how we saw ourselves, right? Because if you think about the early 2000s, South Africa, and just how the Black consciousness movement was deeply impacting us culturally. Bongo Muffin, Stoned Cherry, Sun Goddess, YFM, all of that foundation that's on the basis of ideology that was seeded by people who were born under this natal placement. So it is honestly, yes, incredibly disruptive because um, Uranus is a disruptor. But as Africans, there's, for me, I believe, when I look at this, a lot to look forward to. When we go into the final quarter of the year, we're going to feel that shift specifically with that solar eclipse in Virgo. Um, Geo in September, which will precede the African New Year. And that's going to also coincide with the next retrograde season. And that retrograde season is what gives the final quarter um, that reprieve that I was speaking about, where we start to feel like we know where we stand. And the way that the the retrogrades in the final quarter are set up is that yo yo oi, oi, Marcos. Uranus, for instance, goes back into Taurus at the beginning of November. Um, we're going of that's like a major one because it's going to give us this opportunity to reconsider, right? So that we've had the ideological test through those first 3 quarters of the year, the final quarter kind of says, okay, this is what the ride is going to be. And we get to really strap our boots up and walk into 2026 with a much clearer understanding of what's actually going on. Because right now, we have been gassing ourselves and playing at not caring, playing at being unaffected. And the realities are quickly coming home to roost. The realizations have been thick and fast, and it's not going to get any easier. That second quarter might whack a few. That June, July, yes, I did say that, it's gentler, it gives you space to breathe, but it's not like there are so many squares that happen in June and July. It's just one planet after another. Okay, so we're really happy there, June the 9th, where Jupiter enters Cancer, and we finally have this opportunity to like really deeply consider community and like really sit in that and the collective expression allows us to explore what that means to us. But it's not like you can explore by being outside in the world, traveling, movement. It's not really like that because Mars squares Uranus on June the 15th. Then you've also got Jupiter squaring Saturn, Jupiter squaring Neptune. Like, then before you know it, we're, Mercury retrograde. So June, July, okay, fine. You can breathe again, but like, I don't know, especially Northern Hemisphere summer, if this is one of those. Last summer was most definitely a summer to be outside. Don't know that this summer is going to be one of those. There is so much tension. There is so much tension there. So it's for me, I feel like we'll breathe or feel a sense of control more in the end of the year. I just hope Mars and Sagittarius at the end of the year. I'm not sure what that is playing at. I get nervous when I see Mars in a fire sign. I mean, it's happy there and it does make forward movement. So we do see, like I said again, ourselves moving forward with clarity. But I hope that that clarity doesn't come with war or fighting, because again we will have Uranus back retrograding um, in Taurus, which has shown us um, some vicious conflict. Um, it's not been cute. It's not been cute. Uh, yeah. Okay. So I hope that um, this reading of the year has given you a sense of what is to come and has given you a sense of control for yourself. When we do these readings, they're collective readings because Ngesintu in African astrology, it's on the basis of ukuthi umuntu ngabantu. You cannot manifest, you cannot achieve self-realization without another. There are aspects of yourself that you can only experience in community with others. We are living in these incarnations at these appointed times because our eternal souls asked to be part of this moment. When we give these readings, the objective is to give you an understanding of what is influencing the movements around you, collective movements around you, and what you will be most susceptible to in order to give you an opportunity to reclaim your own agency and sit within yourself and decide how you choose to participate as a member of the collective during that time. Because again, history is made by people, individuals. Trump was just a person, an attention whoring real estate developer who has chased every spotlight that has ever moved within his vicinity. Hitler was a loser in every sense of the word. And look at where we are. Look at where we are today. And on the other side of the coin, Stephen Bantu Biko, Thomas Sankara, Nelson Mandela, village boys who shaped an ideology that has remained unshaken. Long after they're gone. How do we take the baton in this Uranus return, especially for Sankara and Biko? There's possibility here. And each and every person has their own part to play. And you yourself can think of how you want to shape for yourself what home means. Because that's really what Uranus in Taurus has been asking us. And we have seen a lot of that come into question. And if it comes to something above you that has to influence the actions that you take as an individual, where will you stand? Why will you stand there? What do you believe in? Take the time now to try and figure that out. Zinza and uzibone uphumelela. Bakithi, I have been away for a year. There have been a lot of changes that have happened in the time while I've been away. There are a few offerings that we'll be bringing, especially in light of the ban on reproductive health care. Please note that there are limitations to what we can do, but you're welcome to contact us if you do need help, and we will see how we can connect you to that help. And also just in terms of safe space and participating in community, and processing personal ideology, making a safe space to ask questions. And we will have Ukuvula Isfoba available for you to book a session to just have a conversation and like ask questions, not necessarily engaging the ancestors directly, because I know that can be a very daunting thing, and requires that you actually know what it is that you want to know and be ready to know what they have to say. And we're not always there. Sometimes we're just frustrated and we're trying to figure out, or we need to sound out our frustration, to figure out some things for ourselves. And we will be providing safe space for that. We will be holding space in whatever ways we can for our community. We're not yet back to doing moon readings. Preparing for this is such an involved process. Oh my God. Oh my goodness. And I don't even feel like I've gone into as much detail as I would have done in the past. And that's just like I gave myself 3 days to prepare, and it's 2 or 3 days. And it's no, guys, no. I can't believe how easily I used to do this, but we're not yet back in the same way. But we will be sharing some insights, I think, in the course of the next few weeks, and then possibly with the astrological new year, so around March, April, we might relook at where we stand with our more frequent moon readings. But until then, Sinani. We're available on all social media platforms. You can always just drop us an email and find us on sangomasociety.com. Until next time, niphile, niphephe, unikhanyele, niphumelele. Makhosi.